First story, old house. That Halloween night, the street was so empty it felt as if the very joy of the holiday had turned the corner. I was walking home from work along a suburban lane. Paper lanterns flapped in the wind. Papier-mâché pumpkins cast their gazes into the dark. Wet leaves rustled on the asphalt. A minute ago, children in costumes were running here. It smelled of spilled wax and caramel. Fragments of laughter floated in the air. Now, a thin squeak of lanterns, the creak of a spider web of thread stretched over the bushes, and an occasional rustle, as if someone stepped nearby but left no traces. The house on the corner, the one with the collapsed porch and the dim yellow light, had always looked empty. Today, a cardboard sign with an uneven inscription hung on its door. Knock, knock. A silly prank, but under a paper bone pinned to the frame, a faded arrow showed toward a gap between the boards. From there came the smell of stale damp and a sweetish mold, like old books forgotten in a cellar. I should have walked past, but from inside came a quiet thud, as if someone had dropped a clock. 1 second, another. I crouched and pried aside a board. The air was cold as steel. Inside, in the entry hall, under a layer of dust, darkened a round clock face, chapel-like, with Roman numerals. The hand twitched and suddenly froze at 00. Silence became dense enough to be bitten through. I grabbed the handle. The metal, like ice, bit into my palm. The door gave. The smell of mildew and old wood clung to my face. The steps moaned with each footfall, as if complaining. Black and white photographs hung on the walls. Strangers' smiles beneath a film of dust. White teeth like exposed bones. Somewhere deep in the house, something whispered. Not words, more a breathing, like paper rustling. I stopped at a mirror in a narrow corridor. The ceiling bulb trembled, shedding dim sparks of light. My reflection looked at me with tired eyes. I raised my hand and lowered it. The reflection lagged by a fraction of a second, as if it needed to catch up. A strange sign. On the floor by the entrance, a short line was drawn in chalk, and nearby, small prints like children's souls leading up the stairs. I told myself I would leave in a minute, just look and leave. In reply from the wall slid a rustle. Quiet. The word was not a voice. It was a coolness that stirred the hairs on my arms. Upstairs, the clock struck again, but the clock in the hall stood still. My wristwatch flickered and showed 23:59, then 0001, then 23:58. The air seemed to be pulled in different directions, stretching seconds into threads. Shadows on the floor vanished as if licked by flame. My feet had no shadow, the banister had no shadow, only the emptiness under the steps thickened. I climbed. On the second floor, doors were ajar, and behind each, the house was breathing. In one room, faded papier-mâché pumpkins sat on the sill. It smelled of wax inside, as if they'd been lit recently. A crack ran along the wall in a straight line. It seemed to be smiling. I moved further in. In the right-hand room, where there had once been a bedroom, a cold crawled. There stood another tall grandfather clock. The glass glimmered dull. A pendulum swung inside. But the pendulum did not move side to side. It moved forward and back like breathing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Who's there? I couldn't keep the voice in. I asked the emptiness absurdly. The answer did not come at once. In the wardrobe mirror behind me, someone passed. I turned. Nothing. I looked back. The reflection lagged. I raised my hand. In the mirror, it still lay along the body. I took a step. There, I stood still. Heavy, as if through viscous water, the mirrored me began to move, and he smiled a moment before I did. Dusty soot appeared on his cheek where I had none. I backed toward the door. It closed by itself, quietly, as if shut by a palm. The handle yielded, and didn't. The lock clicked from the inside. The walls sighed. The floor underfoot sprang with a creak. A whisper behind the wall became voices, but I couldn't make out the words, like a prayer in an inverted tongue. Yet I heard clearly, "You came on time." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement by the floor, Shadows that had not been there a minute before oozed out from under the bed. They were like wet stains and stretched slowly, forming lines like writing on old paper. Those lines settled around my feet. I jerked. Too late. The wood under my soles softened, like bread crust. Something clicked in the corner. In the clock cabinet, someone's hand slid in, thin, transparent, like a glass blade, and it knocked from the inside on the glass. Knock, knock. I crashed my shoulder into the door. It held fast. In the mirror, my double did not struggle. He stood straight and looked at me with pity. Then he tilted his head, slightly, as children do when examining an insect, and he pressed his palm to the inner surface of the glass. On his palm, the chalked inscription read clearly, "Don't be late." From below, from the hallway, came children's laughter, bright, kind. A paper lantern flapped somewhere near the porch. Someone knocked on the house door. 3 light taps. Knock, knock, knock. I inhaled. The air was sweet as cotton candy, but a metallic dust of fear settled on my tongue. I shouted, "Hey, is someone there?" And my voice answered back from the walls in strange tones, stretched like a record at the wrong speed. The door finally jerked, but not outward, inward. It swung open, and on the threshold stood a boy in a ghost costume, a sheet with crooked eye holes, a bag of candy. Behind him the streetlights shimmered, wet asphalt, living shadows of lamps. He lifted his head. There were no eyes in the holes, and instead of words, a thin hand reached toward me. No, not his hand. From behind his shoulder, as from behind a curtain, a transparent palm stuck out and knocked on the doorframe from the inside. Knock, knock. The walls contracted, the crack in them smiled wider. I dashed toward the light, my foot slipped, and I found myself in the hallway by the round clock. It read 00 Quo, but the hands trembled. On the floor, the chalked line showed more clearly, and nearby the small prints. Now they led not upward, but toward the exit. I stepped on them. The door handle became warm, like a stranger's hand. Outside smelled of rain, caramel, candle smoke. I fell onto the porch and looked back. Inside, the light was out. The mirror was gone. Only dull darkness and dust, and the lazy stir of tulle curtains. The cardboard knock-knock hung on the door, but now someone had added below, "Come back tomorrow." I walked down the street feeling the pendulum still swinging in my chest. Kids screamed at neighbors' houses, lanterns clapped, pumpkins glowed soft and funny. I shoved my hands in my pockets. My fingers trembled. The watch on my wrist showed 23:59. I blinked. Euro 1, 23:58. I stopped and looked at the black window of that corner house. For a second, a palm appeared on the glass from inside. Mine. And in the street's silence, there sounded clearly, knock, knock. Second story, The Walk. This year, Halloween came to me uninvited. I stepped outside and at first thought it was just the night of the usual celebration, pumpkins with burning eyes on every doorstep, lanterns casting a soft light, fog pouring out of the bushes, and everything seemed a bit quieter than usual. But the air was heavy. Cold moonlight sliced the scene into short white rags. I inhaled. The smell of burning and wet earth bit into my nostrils. It was warm and damp at once. Houses on our street were emptying. The shutters of old windows creaked in the wind, as if someone were slowly opening them from the inside. I walked on the wet cobbles, and my boots slapped in time with the rustle of cloaks coming from somewhere far off. Children's costumes lay on benches and before doors, as if abandoned. Later, I saw a paper carnival clown. It looked at me with distracted, faceless eyes. I touched the paper carnival clown. Its cheeks were sticky from the rain. It seemed to me that the light of the blinking pumpkins began to set the rhythm of my heart. I saw them not as lamps, but as little eyes that wanted me to go further. In one yard, a lamppost swayed, and its shadow grew longer, either from the fog or from something lower down. I heard a whisper, not words, but the sound of breathing. Suddenly, someone whispered nearby, "Did you come?" I turned. No one. Only the empty road and the fog that chewed at the lamplight. I approached the house where my neighbor once lived. The old door stood ajar. The creak of the old shutters echoed in my chest like a heartbeat. I put my hand on the jamb. The wood was damp and warm. Something inside was breathing, almost childlike, light, rhythmic. I slipped in quietly. In the hallway, masks lay on the floor. Many children's costumes, their fabrics shining under the moon as if wet. I touched one. Suddenly the light flickered. Darkness swooped in like a dense cloak. I was engulfed by it. Then I heard footsteps. Not one, but many. All small, like children's steps. They climbed the stairs. The rustle of cloaks sounded right behind my back. I turned. There, in the half-light on the steps, silhouettes in children's costumes stood. Their faces were hidden, but the pumpkin light shone through their masks. They did not move. They simply watched. I felt something pulling me down the stairs. My hand was grabbed. It was cold, sticky, like wet paper. "You will stay with us," one voice whispered right into my ear. I jerked back. The lamplight returned. The house was empty. Only one mask lay on the steps. I picked it up. It was my mask. My smile was cut out exactly beneath my mouth. I threw the mask. It did not fall. It hung in the air, the pumpkin eyes blinking once more, and thick, childlike footsteps lodged inside the walls. I stepped back. The door slammed shut behind me. I stood alone in the hallway. The air smelled of burning and wet earth. I heard warm breathing at my ear. It was familiar. It spoke my name. Third story. The mirror fog slid along the street. It became sticky and cold. The house I lived in looked old among the other neat suburban homes. A tile roof, peeling paint, an old crooked mailbox. That Halloween, I was alone. I lit a small pumpkin on the porch. Its light trembled, throwing a jagged circle across the steps, and I felt the house absorb the light. I sat by the window and watched the empty street. There were no people, only the occasional car, gliding dully over the wet asphalt, and children's voices far away. The room smelled of candle wax and old dust, and the smell felt like a person in the house, quietly whispering to me that I shouldn't go out. Then the doorbell rang suddenly. At first I took the sound for the wind, then for a trick of my mind, but it rang again, slowly, monotonously. I didn't go. I heard someone set a foot on the step, the rustle of a coat. Through the fog, it seemed I saw a dark profile on the threshold, a silhouette. I held the pumpkin on my knees and thought that tonight anyone could be wearing a mask. The mirror in the hallway was old, cracked at the edge. I didn't like looking into it late at night. It seemed that not my lips but the shadows behind me were smiling. But I stood to check the lock, and in the reflection I noticed a mismatch. My right hand was pressed to the door, while in the mirror my right hand was already at my heart, fingers digging into the fabric of my shirt, as if someone else were doing it for me. I blinked. The reflection blinked differently. The steps on the porch drew closer. They were not foreign. They sounded as if repeating the steps I had taken around the house as a child, when I walked barefoot and feared drafts. A voice behind the door spread out low and familiar, yet not mine, and at the same time, to mine. "May I come in?" It spoke my name the way no one had for many years, with a soft warmth that came from memory. I pressed myself to the mirror. In the reflection behind me stood a man in my sweater, but his eyes were hollows in which my lamp was reflected. I heard an intake of breath outside the door. I stepped back. The boards underfoot creaked. The lock in the wall clicked from the inside. The door swung open, but beyond it was an empty street and a bare path into the fog. No footsteps, no silhouette. Only a single print in a puddle, blurred, like an imprint on wet sand, and in it footsteps were stamped. I returned to the mirror. There was no longer just a reflection. There stood the house, the same house, but inside it someone moved. My silhouette walked down the corridor. I saw its shadows on the walls, heard footsteps that matched mine, and understood that they began in a place where I had no legs. My heart tore my chest apart. I murmured an apology, to whom I did not know. I felt something cool touch my neck, like a breath that could not belong to me. It said my name calmly, as if explaining a simple truth. I realized I was not watching the house. The house was watching me, and the mirror was a door. I stepped back, but the house stepped forward. My shadow in the glass took my hand and, without asking, led me into the night fog. I was afraid that this would be what my last minutes looked like, me, leading myself home. I tried to scream, but I heard my reflection say from my own mouth, "Thank you for opening."